Good afternoon, everyone. I am Donna Nixon, and this is session 3.2, Building Bridges and Boundaries, Transitioning to Online First-Year Experience Instruction. Please remain muted to minimize background noise. This session is being recorded, and live captioning is also enabled. You can hide the captions. Oh, sorry. I did not enable it. There you go. It is enabled, but you can disable it by going to the live transcript area and choosing hide subtitle. Feel free to submit questions via chat or during the Q&A at the end of the session. I will now turn the session over to Jenny Dale.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's so great to be here with you virtually today. We are going to get started with our presentation in a few minutes. I think we might want to give folks another couple of minutes if they're coming from the fantastic poster session. So I am going to ask everyone, one of my favorite things to do when I teach a Zoom class is to ask people to share in the chat one boring fact about yourself. And my boring fact is that I just ate lunch. So if you want to share a boring fact about yourself in the chat, interpret that any way you'd like. Rachel tilled up her garden yesterday. There was a great poster about a seed library at UNC Chapel Hill, and that relates to tilling and gardens. And my favorite thing about it was that it is, the seeds are kept in an adorable old card catalog. Wow, I don't know, Donna, that's pretty interesting to regularly get 8 hours of sleep. That's a good healthy habit right there. Alicia is in the process of moving offices. Rolando is currently drinking coffee. Chris has a fan blowing in their office. Oh yeah, daylight, this spring forward. I was working with a student earlier this year, or I guess it was in the fall semester, for a long-term research project they were doing for a class, and their argument was that we should just do away with daylight savings time. And I'm really feeling it today. I think they're right. Yes, there's like when I was helping the student do research, really everything we were finding was bad about daylight saving. Like, there just is and kind of random stuff that I wouldn't necessarily think about, but I guess, maybe it's just, correlation and not causation, but I mean, I wonder.
So I'm always confused about this, and maybe someone can explain. Are we in daylight savings time now, or have we just finished daylight savings time? And of course, my dogs are barking.
I believe it began yesterday.
We're in daylight
savings. And yes, Donna is correct. There are more car accidents right after we enter daylight savings time. There are more structure fires. These are all things I learned from working with this student. It was very eye-opening. All right. Well, I see we've had some more people join us, and we are so excited again to have you here. If you didn't have an opportunity to answer this question that I asked, I did ask folks in the chat to share one boring fact about themselves. And this is something that I do sometimes in my class sessions, in Zoom and in real life. Less often, because then the conversation can kind of go off track. But okay, friends, let's get started. So welcome to Building Bridges and Boundaries, Transitioning to Online First Year Experience Instruction. This is the UNCG Go link for our slideshow, and I'll see if one of my co-presenters can pay. Thank you, Rachel. I thought I had asked, but then again, daylight savings, I forgot. So we welcome you to follow along or take a look back at this later. We do want to provide a land acknowledgement. We are all in the Greensboro area, North Carolina, in the Triad area. And we want to acknowledge that the land on which we live and work has long served as the site of meeting and exchange amongst a number of Indigenous peoples, specifically in our area, members of the Kiawe, Catawba, Eno, Saponi, Shakori, and Saura nations. And we would also be remiss if we didn't acknowledge the long history and lasting legacies of slavery on these lands. So just to take a moment to acknowledge those histories. I'm Jenny Dale. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Information Literacy Coordinator at UNCG.
I'm Rachel Olson. I could not find a headshot that could be resized without blurring. So anyway, I'm very attractive, I assure you. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I am the first year communication and social sciences librarian at UNCG.
And we have a colleague who worked hard on this presentation, but isn't able to be here with us live today. And her name is Melodyrood. She also uses she, her pronouns, and she's our student success and open education librarian. And Juanita, you're muted.
We're going to blame daylight savings for that too. My name is Juanita Thacker, and I also use she, her, hers pronouns, and I am the information literacy librarian here at Jansen.
And I think we can safely just go ahead and make a blanket statement that any problems during the session are related to daylight savings time, and certainly not to any of us or anything that we have done. I want to just go ahead by giving you a little bit of an introduction to our first year instruction program, and then to talk about how we transitioned to a fully online first year instruction program during COVID-19 pandemic. So before I go into the details on this slide here, I just want to mention that I think first year instruction, all of our presenters here, we all think it is a really important part of information literacy instruction at UNCG. I have been involved in first year instruction since 2005, when I started doing a first year instruction sessions at the House Undergraduate Library at UNC Chapel Hill as a grad student. And I have been really engaged in first year instruction since then. We have three main programs that comprise our first year instruction program at UNC Greensboro currently. The first is college writing, which is our English 101, 102 course or courses. The second is Introduction to Communication Studies, CST 105, which is kind of a mix of intro to communication studies ideas and also introduction to public speaking. And then a college success or student transition course, which is currently FYE 101, Succeed at the G. That's a course, and many of you at other institutions may have similar courses. That one particularly has evolved over time. This FYE 101 is the current iteration of it, but it has been called University Studies in the past, Foundations for Learning. There have been a number of sort of iterations of it. While I've been at UNCG, I started there in 2010. And as of 2019, each of these programs has a different assigned liaison. And this is a change that has taken place since I started at UNCG. I actually started here as the first year instruction coordinator, where I coordinated instruction for all of these three programs. When I transitioned into my current role as information literacy coordinator, we realized that was not a sustainable model. I realized it long before then, but we particularly as an institution realized that it wasn't really a sustainable model to get the really high quality and sort of high reach instruction that we wanted to have happen for these different programs. So in 2017, we started looking at splitting these things up. And just to give you a sort of organizational perspective, Juanita and Rachel both report to me. So we have, so as the information literacy coordinator, English 101, 102, and CST 105 are sort of in my area, handled beautifully by Rachel and Juanita. And then Melody, again, who's not here today, does not report to me, but is a colleague in our department and is the assigned liaison for FYE 101, just for context. Just to give you a sense of our last sort of normal semester, we had during that time, this is all face-to-face instruction that I'm mentioning on this slide. In our college writing English 101, 102 program, we had 46 library sessions with over 1,000 students spread out over 4 librarians with 1 primary person involved. CST 105, we had 41 sessions, about 950 students, taught by 5 librarians, but again, with one primary liaison involved. And then FYE 101, we had 12 sessions, over 250 students, taught by 3 librarians. And so that was, again, our last sort of normal semester. And we had 99 face-to-face sessions in these 3 programs with over 2,000 students. And of course, there's likely to have been overlap, but really our purpose here is to indicate that there were 2,000 individuals who came into the library to have class sessions for these different program areas. So lots and lots of students, basically, that we were seeing face-to-face in this last, again, normal semester. In March 2020, 2 years ago, I imagine we all remember it well. I had an interesting time digging up some old emails to look at this timeline, but on March 11th, 2020, Rachel and I when we did a practice session, we realized that we were both teaching sessions at the time that the email came out from the university. There was a university email to everyone describing their plan to suspend instruction on March 13th, which was a Friday that year, for a week so that everyone could transition to online learning. Basically, we had just come back from spring break, and also we had just sprung forward. I remember it vividly. So, that's the theme, I guess, throughout our presentation here. We had come back from spring break, we had instruction for a week, and then the entire university decided to suspend all teaching for that following week to give everybody a chance to transition to online learning, and also for a lot of our students to transition physically to different locations. On March 18th, we began to reduce our library hours pretty significantly. Our public service desks closed, and many of our employees began to telework either all or part of their time. And we, in terms of library instruction, pretty much everything was either canceled or moved to an asynchronous online format in spring of 2020. I think for me, all of my sessions that were after March 13th just ended up being canceled. Everyone was kind of scrambling. And one of the ways that people were trying to sort of reduce the load on students during this extremely stressful time was to kind of cut back on research assignments. So in summer of 2020, our department heads, we are all in the research, outreach, and instruction department. Our department head and the department heads of the Digital Media Commons, Special Collections and University Archives, and the Harold Schiffman Music Library all got together and determined that all of our instruction in fall of 2020 was going to be virtual, just for safety reasons, including, of course, first year instruction. And so a lot of time was spent on technology and pedagogy training that was offered widely throughout the libraries to anyone who would be teaching, leading meetings, creating asynchronous online content. Really, we tried to make this widely available. And we were very fortunate, we are very fortunate to have a fantastic online learning librarian, Sam Harlow. And I just don't know that we would have been able to make this transition without already having Sam in place, who had really already started working with us on a lot of these things. But this was still a pretty huge undertaking. And that decision for fall 2020, we ended up extending it to spring 2021. We still didn't have wide access to vaccines at that point, and we wanted to continue to be as safe as possible. Summer 2021 at UNCG, as I am sure at many other institutions, there was a lot of sort of return to normalcy messaging from campus, a lot of focus on in-person learning being sort of a better option for students, but we weren't getting a lot of answers during that summer about any sort of guidelines regarding social distancing, vaccine requirements, masking, things like that. And we were concerned, again, just because of the sheer number of students who attend library instruction sessions through these programs, we were concerned about, the health and safety of ourselves, of our colleagues, of these students, of the campus. So we developed a proposal to continue providing all of our instruction for these different programs in an online format, a mix of synchronous and asynchronous, different options. We did some research, we looked at some assessment data, and we presented this plan to the department heads group in the libraries, and it was approved. And so then my next step was to work with my colleagues who are presenting with me today on creating and sharing some consistent messaging, Each of these 3 programs has a dedicated coordinator, and we wanted to make sure we were being very clear about what we could and couldn't offer during this time. And then actually sorry, Rachel, before we get into CST 105, I'll just mention that we had initially planned this for fall of 2021, thinking that we would probably extend it through spring 2022, which we have done. So we are continuing, at least through this semester, to provide this instruction all online. And honestly, I expect that we will continue what may end up looking more like a hybrid model in the future, just because of those numbers of courses or of sections and students. And so with that, I will turn it over to Rachel to talk about CST 105.
All right, so CST 105 is the program that I'm responsible for coordinating library instruction for. It stands for Communication Studies 105, and it is the Introduction to Oral Communication course. And we have a new gen ed program called MAC, Minerva's Academic Curriculum, and it fulfills the oral communication competency, which used to be called Speaking Intensive, if you're curious. And the students, when they come to the library, they're typically at the stage in the semester where they're working on a persuasive speech assignment, where they have to do some basic research. They have to have 5 sources, including 2 peer-reviewed articles, and they have to essentially persuade their classmates of something. It can be, most of the time, the topics are left pretty wide open. So before COVID, we would do these completely in person, either in 50 or 75-minute one-shots. And these would all happen in a 1 to 2 week period, because CST 105 has a common syllabus, and the course is very, very structured. And so they would all be requesting sessions within the same 2 to 3 week period. And that's important because it puts a tremendous teaching load on me. And so I have to turn to my colleagues a lot and ask them to help cover these sessions. So it's also a big load for them. Many of us would end up doing 2, 3, 4 of these one-shots in a day. And then since the fall of 2020, we've switched to an asynchronous module, which is on our learning management system, and we use Canvas. And it's a little more spread out throughout the semester. And I like the Canvas module for a number of reasons. And there's also, it leaves some things to be desired. I would say one of the pros is that students already know how to use Canvas in general. Most students feel at least some level of comfort with it. And we know from studies that actually our online learning librarian has done that students prefer all of their course material to be in one place. They don't want to go out to a separate external site. They want to be able to just turn things in right there. It is less exhausting in the traditional sense of exhaustion than the 40+ one-shot sessions that we were doing every semester. And it allows students to work at their own pace. As you're learning right now, I speak quickly. And so I sometimes worry that not only that, but having to pack so much content into these sessions, I often am concerned that students aren't getting it. The cons, there is extensive time required for grading, and there's a very complicated workflow and communicating scores to instructors, and students do get a course grade. It counts for like a homework assignment within the course. The ability among students to follow directions varies greatly, and that's what I'll say about that. And the module has been shortened significantly due to the request of a lot of course instructors and the course director. And there have been some significant trade-offs that have gone along with that. We just can't deliver everything that I think we need to deliver, but we can talk more about that later. Just a couple quick numbers for you. I always think numbers look impressive. So in 2020, 2021, more than 1,000 students took this module. The average score was 83.9, which I think is not bad. And then, like I said, there's a workflow. Originally, they would complete 6 checkpoints within Canvas, which was, those are Google Forms. Now there's only 2, and that has been a lot easier for me. I originally had a graduate assistant to help me when I was doing 6. But now that I'm down to 2, it's just me, and that has been a relief. So there's a workflow that involves Google Forms, Google Sheets, and Box that I'm happy to talk about later if anyone is interested. And that's it for me.
All right, English 101 and 102 course overview. So this is a Gen Ed or MAC, as Rachel mentioned, course that fulfills the written communication competency. And students choose either English 101 or 102, or let me begin again. So I teach the information literacy concepts to English 101 and 102 students. And these are primarily, of course, first-year students. The topic of the courses explores argumentative writing and rhetoric. English 102 focuses more on academic writing. I also teach, as you can see, RCO, which is residential college, and FMS, which are equivalent courses for freshman seminar. So they do a lot of the same content where they're exploring an analyzing rhetoric and argument. So it's basically the written version of the CS2 content. However, unlike Rachel's CS2 105 courses, there's quite a bit of variance in assignments amongst the instructors, who are mostly graduate TAs themselves, working on PhDs or masters in English. So I don't have quite as much standardization in the way that I go about teaching information literacy for those students. Which has been a challenge to learn as I onboarded in this position in January of last year. So I don't have quite the same context and background as Jenny and Rachel have for teaching these courses. So for what I've told pre-pandemic, and Jenny had some numbers there that we were doing 30 plus, at least 30 library face-to-face instruction courses. However, transitioning to virtual has been substantially reduced that number to maybe 12 or 13 in the fall of 2021, and even fewer requests this spring 2022. Likely due in part to there being more face-to-face instruction this spring semester as opposed to the fall semester. However, I've been told that there's usually a drop in instruction requests for spring 2022. The college writing research module was created by my supervisor, Jenny Dale. Cover a great deal of information literacy topics, and it's very popular amongst first-year instructors. It's been downloaded 35 times, and that was something that Jenny created to help shore up the information literacy learning while we transitioned on this program to online format.
All right. And Melody is, as the Student Success and Open Education Librarian, she works with FYE 101, but I will be playing the role of Melody for the next few minutes. So FYE 101 is, as this says here, this is from their course description, it's designed to help new students transition successfully to academic and student life. So many universities have a course like this. I'm actually curious, those of you who are at a university or community college, if you have a course that's sort of like this transition kind of content or college acculturation, can you say yes in the chat just to give us a sense of how many people here? Okay, I kind of thought so. So we've got a couple folks saying yes, more than a couple folks. Okay, so this is a very popular model, and I think it is becoming increasingly important at colleges, universities, community colleges, really any higher ed institutions, to help students make the transition. And I think it has been particularly important for this transition right now during the COVID pandemic. So the Student Success Librarian, this used to actually fall under one of our first year instruction librarians. Rachel worked heavily with this course before we hired a Student Success Librarian, Melodyrood, in 2019. But the person who works with this course ends up helping to develop some FYE 101 assignments and provide one-shot instruction. And before a change that I'll talk about in just a moment, this was kind of the extent of it. And you saw from our numbers, we had significantly fewer FYE 101 instruction sessions face-to-face. We had something like 12, whereas compared to 40 and in the 40s for both English 101, 102 and CST 105. But FYE 101 has also been impacted by MAC, and both Rachel and Juanita have mentioned MAC, Minerva's academic curriculum, which is our new general education curriculum, and it rolled out in fall 2021, which again, an interesting time to have to roll out a new general education program in the midst of a pandemic, but we're doing it. And FYE 101 underwent a pretty significant change as a result of this. It became a foundations competency course, which these courses, we are very excited. They require an information literacy component. 2 of the 5 core student learning outcomes are information literacy related. This is a big change from a sort of 2-credit college transition course to now a 3-credit course with transition content, some academic content, and information literacy content. So we knew that this, particularly when we were going into fall of 2021, we knew that there was going to be more of a change in our work with FYE than necessarily our work with English 101, 102, and CST 105, in which we were already pretty heavily embedded. So we created, Melody and I worked together on this. So in my role as an information literacy coordinator, because we weren't able to provide face-to-face sessions, one of the things that we did was I created a slide deck and lesson plan for FYE 101 course instructors to use. And so they have kind of an information literacy day that they do in the course, something we're working on right now. And the instructors go through some activities that I created. They talk about information. They talk about the different ways that students engage with information, at school and in their lives. And then we also had an FYE 101 library module that Melody created, which was meant to help students prepare for their research-based assignment in the course, which is a career research group presentation project. And Melody did some assessment related to that module. We learned recently that the module for most sections wasn't actually required, but was encouraged by the course instructors. So we didn't get a ton of responses to this, but I think they're pretty telling. So we had a question there that Melody created on a Google form. In terms of the topics discussed in this module, please select a preference from the options below. And students could select either, I prefer the asynchronous module that I can do on my own, I prefer this to be taught in the classroom, or I have no preference. And to me, this is unusual that we had like almost exactly thirds in terms of this response. So, students had different preferences or no preferences at all, as a third of them indicated. But it's just helpful for us in terms of looking ahead. FYE 101 went really sort of exploded in the number of sections the course had. It went over 50 in fall of 2021 because it was now part of that general education program. And so this is something that will help sort of inform us in the future in terms of thinking about how we want to move ahead with the kind of instruction that's necessary for a course like this. All right.
Boundaries. So now we'll discuss a few of the reasons why we feel it was and remains to be important for us to say no. Everyone's personal comfort level varies based upon their own health and those around them. So obviously teaching the large in-person groups was not something that we wanted to navigate during the pandemic, as been mentioned throughout this presentation. To that end, it was necessary to enforce those boundaries with our respective faculty, and that can pose challenges at times. Additionally, working virtually can potentially blur the lines between work and daily life, which can adversely affect mental well-being. And that was something that we all, of course, wanted to avoid. Successfully transitioning this instruction online would not have been possible were it not for the support of our supervisors. So for me, that is the very wonderful Jenny Dale, who we have heard from throughout this presentation, as well as our department head, Amy Harris-Hawk, who were willing to stand up for our right to provide instruction in a way that was most comfortable for us.
All right, we're really excited about this part. So we're excited to have y'all involved in this. So we have drafted some technically fictional scenarios that are very reflective of some real life scenarios. And so what we are going to do is we have 2 of these. And since we're talking about making this big transition, we're talking about the need to set expectations, set boundaries. the scenarios focus on those concepts. And so we're going to ask you, I'll read it out loud, the first one in a moment, and then give you a time to think about it. It'll also be up on the screen, and then we'll hear from you either in the chat or if you'd like to unmute yourself. We will be asking at the end of each of the two scenarios, what would you do? So kind of be framing your thinking that way. So here's scenario one. Imagine that you're coordinating library instruction for a first-year course that has 50 sections. You've communicated clearly with the course director, who has communicated with individual section instructors, that all instruction for the course will now be delivered in an online format. An instructor that you've worked with before has asked you to make an exception and come to their class for a face-to-face session. What would you do? And I'll just give you a moment to think about it. And then if you want to share in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself, you can raise your hand so that so it's just easier for me to see that way who might want to share. But it's all up to you, or you can just reflect on this silently. That is fine as well. We will give you a moment to think and share. All right, so you've had about a minute. Again, feel free to either respond in the chat or raise your hand if you want to share verbally. What do you think you would do in a scenario like this, where the expectations have been set pretty clearly, but this is a person that you know and you've worked with, and they want you to make an exception for them? Okay, so we've got one response in the chat from Nora, and she says, I think I would ask why they would like an exception. If it's a good reason, a student with a disability that makes online harder, for example, I might do it. But if it's just instructor preference, I would feel I shouldn't make an exception. I think that's a really good point. And I appreciate you bringing that up, because I think there are reasons that we would probably consider sort of more reasonable. I can't think of a different word. Reasons that are more reasonable than others. So Donna says, I would explain honestly that due to my health concerns, I'm not comfortable giving face-to-face, but we'll be willing to conference into the class. So Donna, this is my situation as well. I'm immunocompromised, and that for me has been a big factor in this whole situation. And I know we have many students at UNCG who are immunocompromised or who have other complicating medical conditions that, can put them at risk as well. And so that is definitely an important thing. And that's something that I have had to be comfortable with explaining, and people have been, very understanding about it. But that's a great point. And Cass agrees with Nora. Chris Baker, you let the camel's nose in the tent. Next thing you know, you have the whole camel in. Alicia, I appreciate that you want me to come. Can you try this online at least once? Oh, I really like that approach, Alicia. I think that's a good idea, because for us, I've kind of alluded to this. We've all alluded to this. We put a lot of time and effort into, like really making our online instruction like the best it can possibly be, both synchronous and asynchronous. And so, after you've already put all that energy in, that's a really great idea to just say, well, can we try it online, this time, and hopefully show them that it's a very similar experience. Elizabeth Ellis, hello, Elizabeth. I hate disappointing people and confrontation, so I'd probably say it's department policy. Yes, I think that's one of the things that was really important to me as someone supervising two of these librarians, the ones who are here, was for me to kind of be the, be the bad guy, or be, take that role to be able to say, if someone is asking you for things that go against what we've decided, send them to me and I can tell them no. Maybe offering extra sessions for people who need help. Yes, I think that Cass says something similar. They can still come to if they need if they want that face-to-face connection, which I completely understand, they can still come and join us. So, all right, thank you all so much. If anyone is, still typing or thinking in that about that one, please feel free to continue to do so. But I will move on to the next one. Scenario 2. You've worked hard to develop and regularly assess an effective and engaging asynchronous module for a first-year course with 75 sections. You've tested the module with students who've confirmed that it takes approximately the same amount of time as a face-to-face one-shot, but the course directors think it's much too long and that students won't complete it. This may sound sort of familiar based on an example we provided earlier. They want you to find a way to cut the content by about 50%. What would you do? And we're going to take the same approach where I will give you about 1 minute of thoughtful reflection time, and then would love to hear from you. What do you think you would do in this situation? Gosh, a minute feels like a really long time in that kind of situation. I always tell people, well, I don't always tell people. Sometimes I tell people this about waiting for questions or waiting for responses. Is that I was taught early on in my teaching career to sing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star in my mind after I say, does anyone have any questions? And then, so during these Zoom years, I have now started singing it twice so that I'm giving people plenty of time to share in the chat. Okay, Nora, since I've been regularly assessing the module in this scenario, I would probably have hard data on how many students complete the module that you can show the course director. I think that would be really helpful. I think people respond, typically people respond well to data and find it to be more convincing than what they see as maybe anecdotal evidence. Any other thoughts, responses, ideas? Okay, Donna says if I can reasonably deliver all of the important content in 50%, would try cutting. Otherwise, make a counter suggestion of breaking the module into 2 separate modules. I like that option as well. This is a good. I like this sort of suggested quote from Cass. Have the students express this concern? If so, perhaps we can work together to make it more manageable. What a diplomatic response. I like that. Rather than letting the instructor completely cut content on their own. And that's another potential risk here, is that you say, I just can't cut it. And they then decide what they want to cut. Elizabeth would ask the instructor if they would consider 2 shorter modules. Chris, ask them what they think needs to be cut. Yeah, these are all great. So getting the course directors actually involved in the process of making some of these decisions, so it's not just in our court to decide. I think that we often as librarians are kind of trained to, and this goes into, goes back to what Juanita was saying. I think we're kind of trained to say yes to things. And that there are lots of reasons. That's a whole separate presentation. But I think I often find myself thinking, well, a little bit is better than nothing, as if it's an all or nothing kind of model. And so I think it's important for us to think about ways that we can potentially reframe these things. And I really appreciate all of your participation. All right. So what's next?
So I think for us, some of the key points to take away from this are harness the online tools that you already have. I think, like Jenny said, having an online learning librarian really saved us. Really, when all of this started. We also had been working on a pretty extensive suite of library tutorials for a couple of years already. So we had some of those tools that, you know, we could just send a link about a lot of these skills and it would walk them through. Someone created a virtual library tour, which has been really nice because even if they can't physically come in, they can see what it looks like and they can still get a feel for it. The power of no is definitely something that we've learned to wield. I think that this has pushed us all to our limits and beyond. And I think that having the courage to say no, but also having supervisors who are willing to help you say no is really important, and just not being afraid to express what you need and what you can and can't do. Having data is helpful. I think that if you can say, you know, things like with Melody's module, when, you know, people keep saying that students don't want to learn online and they prefer to learn in person. I think that some data can help prove that that's not necessarily the case. And so there are good reasons to continue to allow this sort of instruction to take place online. You have to be flexible. I think flexibility is absolutely essential. It's something that has gotten us through just being adaptable and willing to think on your feet. And the fall semester remains uncertain for us. I think we're looking at probably more of a hybrid approach than we've done in the past, but you know, those conversations are ongoing. And then we just have some suggested reading. These aren't necessarily related specifically to this work. I just think they're kind of valuable. Fobazi Itar's work on vocational awe and librarianship has been really transformative for me in terms of how I think about my work, but also within the context of my life more generally. And it just, you know, it's really important boundary setting work, I think. And then also Katrina Davis Kendrick has done some things on low morale in academic librarians. And she has an analogy that I really love, where there's a bulletin board behind you, and every time someone comes in and asks you to do something, you have tasks on the board and you say, okay, well, which one am I going to take down and replace with this idea that you've just had? So I really like that. And then NPR has some things on the pandemic and trauma that you might be interested in. And that's it. If anyone has questions, please feel free to raise your hand or put it in the chat. We're happy to take some questions.
And I did put the link again to our slides in case you missed it earlier. It does have live links to some of the things we've talked about, as well as all our email contact information. But Rachel, as you're talking about the Katrina Davis Kendrick, you know, what can I take off of this bulletin board or of this whiteboard or whatever it is? That's kind of similar in some ways to what people were suggesting with the module scenario, right? To say, all right, I can cut it, and you know, I can cut it by 50%, but you have to choose the things that we're crossing out here, so that, you know, it's not all on us to make those kind of decisions. So yeah, I think there's like one or 2 minutes if anyone has any questions for us.
Well, it looks like there are no questions at the moment. I just want to thank the presenters for this really thoughtful presentation, and remind our participants that the next sessions will begin at 1:50. They are 4.1, full of emotions, emotional labor and emotion regulation strategies in archive settings, and 4.2, automating collections review, prospect and limitations. So I hope you'll join us then, and feel free to ask a question. We have I'll leave the room open for a couple more minutes.
Yeah, so Nora mentioned having an issue with the slides. If anybody else is having that issue, please feel free to contact me, and I will make sure we get sort of a downloaded version for you. Maybe Google Slides is just so excited about launch today. There's just so many Google Slides happening.
It's the time change.
Yes, that's right. I already forgot that we're blaming everything on daylight saving.
Right.
Well, thanks everyone. We hope to see you at other sessions today.
Juanita, what time is your other session with Suzanne?
It is at 2:15.
Cool.
I'm gonna scarf some food down.
Yep. It's a good plan.
All right, thank you, everybody. I look forward to seeing you later on today.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye.